Culture is another sort of big area that came up as one of the areas of debate around what went wrong, why Sidewalk went sideways, thinking about the culture clashes between the New Yorkers and the Torontonians, the culture clashes amongst different organizations and different ways of working between the levels of government, the bureaucrats, the big tech firm, and the private sector. What role does culture play and cultural disconnects play in this story and in what happened?
I mean, it's everything. There are so many different ways that this happened. So the fundamental disconnect culturally was that this was a bunch of mavericks who changed New York, who changed the internet, came to a city that is extremely process oriented and does not like breaking rules. So you had a bunch of rule breakers and then a bunch of people who really love the rules. And fundamentally, this was something, this was a chance to rewrite cities. And sometimes rules are meant to be broken. I do a lot of my reporting by getting people who aren't supposed to tell me things to tell me things. I am not saying that rules always need to be followed. However, there was an inherent clash between those sort of two cultures, this sort of like American maverickness and Canadian, let's just stay the course. Additionally, there was also within Sidewalk, there was a little bit of similar tension. And there was at one point, Sidewalk disagrees with how it was characterized to me by people within Sidewalk. But there was such a tension within the company about how the New Yorkers were coming up to the Toronto office and sort of burning through things, not really taking the time to say hello, not really understanding the Canadian context of how, Canada is a little bit slower, what even Canadian culture is. So they actually had to bring in a former City of Toronto media relations officer who was doing a PhD in placemaking to give a slideshow to be like, okay, so here's Molson Canadian, here's poutine, here's the Tragically Hip. I've seen the slideshow. That was the level of explaining that had to be done. And it was inherently, even within Sidewalk, Canada was probably just not a great idea for what they were trying to achieve, because that culture clash, I think it did eventually somewhat smooth over internally, but still it kind of goes back to what we were talking about 2 seconds ago, which was that this sort of the American mindset and the Canadian mindset, they didn't necessarily agree. And there were people who spoke to me, again, I'm a reporter, I say middle of the road, but multiple people made the observation that Sidewalk Labs saw Toronto as this backwater that they were going to turn into a castle. And they were going to fix this place. There was not necessarily an understanding of the place. They did try to bring people in and actually help understand what Toronto was, but in the sort of upper echelons of decision making, that frustration kind of continually existed. And so this sort of constant culture clash really prevented the two sides of the table in every sense of that from really getting along.